Welcome back to Shannons Club TV, the show for all motoring fans to relive the histories of cars in Australia. In each episode we profile our feature car with selected images, new insights and an owner's well-preserved example.
We'll also get the latest market trends from the Shannons auctions team. So let's kick off with the cute but clever 1960 sports cars that showcase Japan's emerging engineering genius, the Honda S600 and S800.
Like Porsche, Maserati, Ferrari and Lamborghini, Honda entered the four-wheel world with sports cars. Soichiro Honda wanted to create his unique niche. Further, as with motorcycles, racing versions could be developed. Soichiro Honda absolutely believed that racing improves the breed. His vision was that the entire fledgling Japanese automotive industry should become internationally competitive with Honda at the cutting edge. The S360 and S500 were shown at the 1962 Japanese Motor Show. 2 years later, Honda was in Formula One. Now Mark, the Formula One car was in no way to be confused with those first road cars, was it?
No, indeed. But you know, what that first Honda Formula One car did was showcase Honda's Grand Prix winning motorcycle technology on four wheels, which of course would later filter down to their road cars. I mean, you look back at 1965, the last year of the 1.5 litre engine rules in Formula One. Honda had a 60-degree 1.5 litre V12 with 4 camshafts, 48 valves, fuel injection, and that thing would rev safely to 14,000 RPM.
And how do they fit everything in there?
And the world just stood back and said, wow.
Wow.
And of course, that kind of technology filtered down into these early Honda sports cars. So it was incredibly impressive at the time.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
But even at 725 kilos, the S360 was too heavy for an engine of that size, no matter how brilliant, and only the S500 went into production. In 1963, cast iron engines, single carburetors and a breathless 5,000 RPM were the norm. And here was this fabulous little jigger with a shrieking quad carb SOHC all alloy 44 horsepower engine and a VMAX of 80 miles per hour. The S500 had a separate chassis and chain drive. There was nothing like it in the world. Almost more four-wheeled motorcycle than car. 3 months on, it was superseded by the twin-cam S600. This 606cc engine made 57 horsepower at an extraordinary 8,500 RPM. A coupe version was added in late 1963. But Soichiro still wanted more, and the 791cc S800 arrived in our month of decimal currency, February 1966. Within 4 months, and with conservative export markets, chiefly the US and Australia, in mind, the radical aluminium chain case independent rear end was replaced by conventional drive with a rigid rear axle, 4 links and a panhard rod. Exports to the US began that October. Both the S600 and S800 were sold in small numbers here. Motoring guru Bill Tuckey, in the guise of funny man Romsey Quince, tested the ultimate S800M with front disc brakes and radials and pronounced it no longer a toy. With 70 brake horsepower, a top speed of 100 miles an hour and that pretty little body, the jewel-like Honda was an utter joy and an early example of Japanese automotive art. Mark, we can see these cars as precursors to the S2000, can't we?
Oh, really? Certainly, yeah. And that car had a lot to live up to, given the incredible performance of those early S-Series cars from decades before. Soichiro Honda used motor racing to inspire his engineers to push boundaries and innovate through factory-backed Grand Prix campaigns on both 2 and 4 wheels. Honda's iconic S600 and S800 sports cars were clever amalgamations of those cutting-edge technologies and were also destined for competition use. Following its launch in 1964, the S600 quickly became a familiar sight in Japanese production sports car racing. in which it proved competitive in the under 1000cc GT1 class against Toyota and Daihatsu rivals. Denny Hulme also scored a famous S600 class victory in Germany's Nürburgring 500. 2 years later, its S800 successor proved even more competitive in GT1, particularly after Honda's Racing Service Centre at Suzuka performed numerous modifications, which included enlarging the engine capacity and raising output to 100 plus brake horsepower at a shrieking 10,500 RPM. This racing version, called the RSC, claimed some giant-killing results. The most famous was the works-prepared car, which won the GT1 class in the prestigious Suzuka 12-hour in 1968. The tiny production-based racer also finished a stunning third outright, beaten only by two purpose-built Can-Am type sports cars boasting far superior performance. John, the term giant killer seems most appropriate when describing these fabulous little cars, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and they were so tiny.
I know.
And isn't it interesting, the 360cc engine finished up getting a run later on in the Scamp, and that was tiny too, and the Honda Z.
Just so tiny. I mean, the wheelbase was what, 2 metres, overall length about, they weren't much bigger than a single bed when you looked at them, but the ergonomics of it was so clever. I sat in one, and for someone my height, I couldn't believe it, that I could actually fit in it quite comfortably.
Yeah.
I mean, there was so much motorcycle Grand Prix technology just oozing out of that car.
Yes, absolutely right.
It was just so impressive for its time.
Phenomenal.
Amazing stuff. An important export market for Honda was Australia, where the S600 and in particular the S800 proved a popular choice for production sports car racing. One of the most prominent local drivers was Noel Riley, whose S800 was another special car, having been prepared for racing by the factory in Japan with exotic modifications that justified its inclusion in the improved production class. Riley's S800 won its first race outright, followed by a string of wins in 1967. It also set numerous class and in some cases outright sports car lap records during its reign as the undisputed king of the under 1100cc division. And it always kept larger engine British rivals like the Austin Healey Sprite, MG Midget and Triumph Spitfire on their toes. On reflection, the S600 and S800 gave Australia its first taste of Honda's formidable expertise in car design and performance, which of course would reach new heights of global success in the decades that followed. Remember to join the Shannons Club, where you can connect with other enthusiasts around the country.
My name's Kath Talentolo and this is my 1965 Honda S600. Its nickname was Harry the Honda. Mum and Dad got the car about 40 years ago. It's actually been the only car in our Honda car club that's been in the one family for such a long period of time, but it was actually in reasonably good condition when they got it. When we bought the car, it was drivable at the time. It just needed a really good clean up. Chrome was pretty big in the 1960s, especially for bumper bars and hubcaps. I actually went for a current Honda Red, which is much easier to replace and fix if we required. No heating, no aircon. My favourite feature would be the steering wheel. It's enormous because it has no power steering, so therefore you need it to be able to turn the wheels. You have to pack pretty light, the boot's very small, you can't take everything with you. Double overhead cam, 600cc engine and is chain driven to the rear wheels. Drives and handles really well for its age. It is very small, so when you're in the car, you're constantly aware of other cars around you. But it's fun and it will do everything that anybody else's car will do, it's just a bit louder. There's no point having a soft top car unless you're actually prepared to use it. As I've grown up, I really appreciate this experience of being out in the open. It's just you and the road and whoever you're with. I am a Shannons member and have been a Shannons member for probably 20 years. All our cars are insured with Shannons, and any time that we've had any issues, Shannons have been really, really helpful. No future plans for the car, it will stay in the family.
Shannons National Auctions Manager Chris Borobin joins us with the latest on the Honda S600 and S800. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome, mate. I absolutely love these cars. They are just so quirky and so fantastic. Like, what are your chances of finding one now, though, that's in even close to original, well-kept condition?
Look, I think there is quite a good demand for them today, and I think the collectors have really, spent time over the last few years really bringing them back to original condition. So we are seeing a few coming out on the market.
Well, that's great.
It's a miniature masterpiece. It's like a scale, 50% scale model of a Ferrari or something. They're gorgeous little car, a real little jewel.
Yeah, they were very robust in their construction, even though they
body
were
on frame.
Body on frame constructions. But that engine, I mean, you had to rev it really hard to get the performance out of it. That's what Honda recommended that you do.
No one had ever heard of such a thing.
I know.
Very similar to motorcycle technology, really, when you
very
think about
much
it.
so.
Because anything under 6,000 or 7,000 RPM, you had nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
You had to, from 7 to 10,000 is where it actually came alive.
So as a result of that, these engines would have really copped it. I mean, trying to find something that's been well kept, I just can't imagine they'd be out there anymore after all that time.
There are, luckily, a few experts still out there that are good at tuning those S600 and S800.
Was it all scaled down? You need a smaller screwdriver.
Well, I know that back in the Japanese interest in these cars was huge. And I know in the 80s and 90s there were a lot of Japanese buyers coming to Australia and taking them back to Japan. So the Japanese, they loved this car.
Yeah, they did. And you're right. I mean, in the 90s we did see, a fair number of really good S600s and 800 leave the country. But we know how rare, especially the coupes are. I mean, they built a lot less coupes than they did in roadsters.
Yeah. Okay. So if someone's looking for one, I mean, this is a bit of a detective case, isn't it? What do you do? Like, where do you start?
Look, I think approach your car clubs. There's quite a bit of following for the Honda S600 and 800. So definitely talk to the car clubs out there. That's where a lot of the good ones reside. But outside of that, we still see a few coming up for sale. So
I've seen a few go through the blocks at Shannons Auctions.
Absolutely, we have had a few over the years, and they've ranged from really good to pretty poor. But also that's encouraged buyers looking for something to restore to also get into a car to actually restore.
Is the convertible more desirable than the hardtop?
That's an interesting question, John, and I think. You would think because the coupe is built in lesser numbers that it would be more desirable potentially or more sought after than the roadsters, but there's a lot of people that gravitate to the roadsters. So, look, I think in the ultimate world you'd have one of each. But yeah, look, I think if you can find the right car, the right basis, it's worthwhile.
Definitely worth it.
Terrific. And remember, you'll get all the latest auction results on the Shannons Club website. If you'd like your own competition image of these Honda sports cars, visit AutoPix, Australia's most comprehensive motorsport photo archive.
Yeah, in summary, you look back at the S600, the S800, but then you look at the success of the Honda Motor Company overall. It really does the inspiration really came from one man, didn't it?
One man, Soichiro Honda, who died in 1991. Just a little while after the NSX came out, and I've got a feeling that the NSX had his touch all over it, the way it was conceived and the brilliance of it, which in some ways the S600 and S800 foreshadowed, but the NSX was the grander thing again. And I think after Soichiro Honda died, I think Honda did lose a great deal of its distinctiveness.
Soichiro was an engineer. He made sure his engineers were just as passionate and as focused and as enthusiastic. And that went right through the company, right up.
And he was able, because he was the boss, that engineering perfection also manifested itself in beautiful finish and high build quality, whereas another company, engineering driven, like say Citroën, that didn't go all the way through to the production quality, but in Honda it did.
Quite incredible, isn't it? Really, it's an amazing story.
Yes.
Yeah.
We hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the jewel-like Honda S600 and S800, and we'll catch you next time on Shannons Club TV. Bye for now.